introduction. I like I'm now going to be the professor from Jamaica. That's as well, that's going to be my stage name going forward. I think that's a good one, right? Dr. Nugent Hill. I have the degree, Dr. Nugent Hill, or honorary doctor recipient from the Caribbean Maritime University. I'd like to greet everyone and thank you for inviting me. Thanks in particular to the BOAS for the work you do. SIP in particular, I was just mentioning to Mona just how much great work you do in pulling people together and dismantling the silos which typically exist in our space and in our region. It's good to be here again, and as you mentioned, the Chief of Secretariat mentioned the partnership that we've enjoyed with the OAS SIP through the scholarship arrangement and or the signing of our MOU. I just wanted to make another point, which is quite interesting. And this is how pulling people together makes things work, right, Jorge? So we have an MOU with you.
Yes, sir.
You now are about to sign an MOU with Port of Antwerp, Bruges. We are about to do the same. You're about to sign with GSD. We already have signed an MOU with GSD. So let's just all put it together, and we'll have much more impact in a much more meaningful way when we do it together. But today you've invited me to speak about AI. And something very interesting about AI was that while I was down there trying to check something on my phone, Meta AI popped up on my WhatsApp and started talking to me. It was a little scary for me. But the truth is that we talk about AI as if it is this one uniform, homogeneous thing that somehow everybody can understand and appreciate. And there are two different types of AI that I want to focus on today as we look at what it means for ports and what we'll have to do going forward and workforce readiness. There's of course what we know as generative AI. Very popular ones we experience in academia and in education, where one very popular one is ChatGPT. People put things in, it churns things out. But for a long time, those of us in maritime education have focused on AI, but we've done it a little differently. There's what's known as, depends who's talking, what's known as agentic or agentic AI, which is really a lot of the simulators that we've been using for safe training for our cadets and others. I'm very proud of what the STEM is doing, and I'll start there just to say a little bit about who we are in case you don't know. We're full gamut, full spectrum, end-to-end, top to bottom, all of the areas that you're talking about, from port management, international shipping, to the engineering components to do with solutions related to the maritime and marine environment, to security of ports and beyond, to conversations surrounding customs. We have the only customs program in the region. So we are very familiar with what it means in terms of this very present and pervasive thing that's happening to all of us. So let me take you through a few slides that would hopefully stimulate some thoughts and some discussions around this. When I consider the real risk that we all face, and I think it probably would have come out in almost everybody's presentation. I'm sorry I missed the chairman's keynote yesterday, because I'm sure Captain Carl gave us some food for thought. But I think really what we face is, let's start with skills shortages first. And some research out of Port Technology International 2025 suggests that 81% of maritime firms are running AI pilots. Everybody realizes this thing is important, this thing is crucial, and so they want to understand whether it fits into their space. But at the same time, only 11% have actual formal policies to guide any real scale. And isn't this a perennial problem in the region, where there are exciting new novel things that appear to be, about to take over the world, and we run headlong into that without first having the frame and the guiding policy for doing so. Again, 38% suggest that there's inadequate training, and that is one of the main barriers to AI adoption. 58% of terminals still rely on manual data practices despite the growing AI investments that are being made. And I think that this picture is an important one for us. It tells us, one, that there's a widening gap in the technological advancement, and for those of us who would have studied this many years ago, we never thought we would have seen it still happening to this extent. and re-emerge in this time and space. What does it all mean for us? It means that AI implementation without workforce preparedness is going to be a real challenge, and the institutional dependency that is likely to emerge on external expertise, and I'm saying this in a Caribbean region that understands that external expertise many times has to be relied upon, that we will not be able to chart our own path if we are not keeping pace with this kind of training and development required. Blue Economy Journal tells us something. It tells us that there are, in terms of people's comfort levels and how they feel about AI, 70% say that AI should recommend, should enhance, should help, not replace human decision making. And the power of the human mind is seen as quite critical. 66% however fear that over-reliance on AI will erode skills and judgment. Now we understand that the AI is adapting as it goes forward. We separated generative from agentic earlier. But here's a real number I want us to focus on. 24% of maritime cadets receive structured training on smart or autonomous ships. Now you tell me, you think this number is sufficient or insufficient? 24% of marine cadets or maritime cadets. It's a small number, given where the world is going. And in our own space, one of the challenges, obviously, is that the technology in institutions will never keep pace, especially in developing regions, where there's a dependency on government support and funding, will never keep pace with the rate at which these technologies are pervasive in industry. And I'm going to say something about that a little later. A very interesting study recently by our partner university, the University of Technology. I think you'll find this very interesting. When they looked at students who were studying in the field of STEM, yes, science, technology, engineering, math, they discovered that 100% of the students are using AI. That's not surprising. I'm sure that's not counterintuitive to any of us. Yet, there's some opposition to using AI for schoolwork. Now, I found this particular finding interesting and almost counterintuitive. That some of them were somewhat opposed to using it in their assignments, but they use it regularly. And then when they looked at the flip side of that, lecturers were feeling very uncomfortable and almost being prohibitive and punitive with the use of AI. Well, what are the implications of these findings for ports? Well, it means that the employees may already be using AI in varied settings. And I'm going to throw this at you. I've been told that if you're teaching someone to sing, it's easier to teach someone to sing who doesn't already think they can sing. Blank slate is easier to shape and frame than someone who's already doing it, and you have to erase or help them to unlearn to learn it appropriately, to be using it in a very formal way. So I think the challenge too is partially the exposure to it is a good thing, but there's the other side of it, which means there may be some difficulty in rewriting and retooling for the purposes that you may need it. The second bit is that there's a generational skills readiness gap. So AI tool familiarity, clear. If you look at students and faculty, there's a gap between what the students are able to do and what faculty is able to do. How do we as educational institutions, tertiary institutions, treat with this issue of the readiness of people who have an enormous amount of skill and competency in the port space, but who are simply not ready to embrace and to engage and to infuse in their curriculum and pedagogy this thing called AI? The implication for the ports is that, of course, your younger workers are likely to be more ready, while some of your leaders may be less inclined to embrace. And so that particular matter needs addressing. And again, the fear of skill and job replacement, everybody talks about this, and I'm happy for how Sir President framed the context, that it is a reshaping, a rethinking, and that it is that roles are going to evolve and become higher order, more critical, than what we have now, which are things which can easily be done by the technology.
I was very shocked the other day when a friend of mine sent me a song he produced. And I didn't know he was a musician. What the verse should be, what the chorus should be. It decided what instruments to layer. It started with a piano, and then it put some strings, and then it put some horns, and then it put an entire production that he was calling his own. And he had absolutely no creative injection other than to give it some words. I wanted to think about that in the context of ports and where we're going and where autonomous operations are concerned and what this may mean. Again, back to the distinction between generative and agentic or agentic. What does this mean, as I'm closing? Is that some shifts are going to be required. And I think the first shift that is required is certainly a technical shift. That the notion of predictive analytics will need to become a part of our DNA and not so much something that's reserved for those who are techie and smart. Predictive analytics are going to be quite critical. So we're moving now to intelligent data-driven technologies, and we are also insisting that even in our university, where we still have a GMDSS room, we're not going to shut it down. But in parallel to all of that, because we believe that they must be able to read all these charts, manually and otherwise, but in parallel to all of that, we're introducing them to the most cutting-edge technologies so that they're able to coexist in a space. And that takes me to the second shift, the operational shift, where there now needs to be human-machine collaboration. And I believe that's what the chair of the panel was saying, that it's about redefining the roles and redefining how workflow takes place through greater collaboration. And of course, the elephant in the room is that there must be a cultural shift. The resistance that exists, the fear that exists, needs to be converted into a real understanding that there is powerful opportunity. And so, building a culture of trust, adaptability is going to be hugely important. Now, the governance shift is one of those areas that I want us to think a little bit about, because we do have a role to play in this area. It's about developing policies and ethical frameworks that will support, remember where I started? That we're piloting AI programs, many of us, and we don't have a framework for guiding how AI is infused and operationalized in our port spaces. So, very important to have that AI governance framework in place. What is our response? I'll just tell you very quickly because I'm not here to sell the CMU. Before AI became exciting and, can I use the word sexy at the OAS? Is that allowed? Yeah, I see. The moderator of the panel said it's okay, so I'm going to go ahead. It is sexy. It is sexy. So before AI became sexy and was on the lips of everyone, the CMU had a degree in artificial intelligence and computer systems. We saw this wave coming. And we've also been positioning our university to become what we call the National Applied AI Hub for Jamaica. We believe that this human-machine collaboration is important, and we understand that we have not dinosaurs, but older people in our system who need to learn it. And so we're providing that training for them to ensure that they can interface properly with our students. We're doing the necessary research. So we were recently accepted into the International Association of Maritime Universities, and since then got a grant-funded research project in partnership with the World Maritime University, looking at extended reality, which is really just all of what we're talking about, the blended components of all of this. So virtual reality, augmented reality, and looking at how that gives access to education. And we're doing that in partnership with WMU and a university out of Spain. And I believe that the findings of that will be quite helpful, certainly in this space, and hopefully we'll get to present that at another point. We've also been big on simulations and using agentic AI. And recently we launched our Logistics 101 program for people who are aspiring to work in ports, and of course including that we have cybersecurity and AI. Now the last thing I will say to you is that if we're going to do it, it has to be a joint up approach between all of you here, between governments, between the private sector, between education space. And it's going to have to be a realization that ports and maritime mean more to us than it means in some other places in the world, and we must understand this and act accordingly. Look at Jamaica's budget. National budget of almost $2 trillion. Only 0.1% of that is dedicated to training in ports and maritime. That has to shift. We have to understand that we must support in a very significant way that which feeds us, because it does feed us. And so my final statement, as I have 3 seconds left on the clock, the ports of the future will be defined by how effectively we prepare people. By how effectively we prepare people to lead within intelligent environments. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.